Hello and welcome back to DriveDriverDriven. I'm Humble and we're back on the Zero project again today with a few updates and a bit of a redo because I had filmed a bunch of stuff in kind of first person mode with the camera on my head, and then watching back the footage I realized you couldn't see anything I was actually doing. So I'm just going to catch you up really quick on the progress and we're going to move on from there. All right, the wiring adventure continues. I really did want to bore you guys with a bunch of wiring. Wiring sucks enough as it is, but it's even worse watching someone do it. So I'll take you through a couple things that I've done that are non-standard and show you a bit of a system test. So right now I've just got the chassis part of the wiring harness. That's just where I started. I haven't done the engine harness yet, and in fact I have it disconnected just so I could isolate the chassis side. I have done all my power cables. This is where the battery is going to live. What I've done is I've run a lead from the battery to the alternator positive, from the battery up to the fuse box underneath the dash, and then from the dash over to the starter. So a lot of smaller leads, and it's sort of a truncated... Hi, Kumo. Hi, yes. This is all about you. This is the Kumo show. Oh my goodness. Okay. Hi. Master electrician Kumo has come to oversee my work. But anyway, so just 3 shorter pieces. That's the way that GBS sets them up from the factory. I just needed shorter runs because of the battery's location. And that should help with, things like starter, less resistance over a longer run, etc., etc. Not that it really matters for a small car like this. One note on the alternator is... I haven't fired up the engine, and we will find out in testing, but I've seen in a couple places it mentioned that if the alternator plug is disconnected, it will charge 14 volts just all the time. Normally, if I have the plug here, the red lead is feedback, and then these 2 other leads are actually for CAN bus control, and this is meant to be controlled by the ECU. So we'll figure out if what I've read is correct or not. Now, as far as the wiring goes, and kind of what I was having some trouble with, is in the instructions, the build manual that I have, this kind of 11-way plug is different from what's in the instructions as far as the pinout goes. And the pinout for this flasher relay is also different from all of the standard relays that I've tried, and I actually had to rewire the actual plug here. Another relay that may or may not come with your donor kit is, this is actually for the headlights, which is part of the column harness. And then I've got our buttons done up mostly. I've got our fog light, our horn, and our hazard switch wired up. And I have yet to do the defrost and the engine start because I need to verify a couple things there. The one thing I don't like about how the hazard switch is set up currently is that it doesn't turn on while the car is off, and I need to remedy that, because the whole point of hazards is you need to be able to turn them on when the key's out of the ignition, or you're by the side of the road, or the ignition's off. So I need to fix that. But if I turn the car on, our dash comes to life, our odometer button is working, the only gauge that reads correctly right now is actually a voltometer. The oil, I think the oil temp, yeah, the oil temp sensor is currently not wired, and the speedo is actually not wired. I still have to run the wires for that, as far as like the actual pickup sensor. But everything else is ready to go. Here is the kind of nice looking harness that GBS provides. So it's just one connector here, and everything's good to go, with the exception of the oil temp sensor, which is something that I specified. If we do a quick test, our wipers, wipers working away. They do work on intermittent, which is nice. You can hear the relay do its thing. And it goes back to park. That's our washer bottle, which works, which is great. Got our turn signal up there. Other side, and here at the back. Our idle lights. Pardon the fan, but idle lights are working, or parking lights, whatever you want to call them. Our headlights and flashers, high beam, dip beam, momentary. Oh, by the way, so if you hadn't noticed, I've already swapped all of the bulbs for LED. So turn signals are LED, headlights are LED, tail lights LED, reverse light, fog light, etc. So there we are in reverse. Got our fog light on. Our fog light will turn on if I actually turn it on. Or maybe I disconnected it. Oh, I did. Okay, so the fog light is currently disconnected because there is an issue I needed to correct. That goes back to this 11-pin plug. I think I had the wiring set up switched for power feed for the hazard switch and the fog light. So the fog light would just be hot all the time, and the hazard switch would only come on with ignition, and it should be the other way around. Fog light should be on with ignition, and the hazards should have power all the time. So that's what I have to correct. Lastly, I have a little, let's take it out of reverse here. And our last little test is brake light, which I have a little jumper for. I can get it to there, nice and bright. So first up, I moved the toolbox from this corner of the garage into the back, and I still need to fix this shelf because the bottom of it collapsed, but this frees up a lot of this area here, which is going to be important when we get on to the Ultima project, as it frees up about a full car width in the garage. Once we roll the Zero out of the garage, we'll be able to fit the entire body and all of the Ultima components into the garage in its entirety. You probably saw these. These are the new replacement fuel cells for the Ultima. I'll talk a little bit more about these when we get onto the Ultima build, but I'm glad to finally have these on hand. Things are still in a bit of a chaotic mess, both from relocating the toolbox and getting the Zero wrapped up. Previously, I had showed the battery, and this is another bit of an update. I changed the way that the battery hold down works. Instead of using the fabric strap, I just fabbed up this little angle bracket, and this battery hold down clamp is actually from an older race car, and I just need to trim this threaded portion down a bit to make it fit better, but otherwise it's a really robust way to hold down the battery. Electrically, the chassis harness is complete. There's only a couple steps left for the actual engine harness, but I decided to go with the standard posts for the battery versus just the like M5 bolts that were in it before. If we look at the dash is basically complete. I did have to change the order of these 3 gauges just based on what the harness would reach. So they now go water, fuel, and voltometer, and I'm okay with that. We have our odometer reset button and everything. They do an initial sweep when you first power on the gauges. I really like the way they illuminate in the dark. And if we pull this off, set it down here, you can see this is the prefabricated harness I was talking about before that just slips into the back of the dash area here. And then this is another connector I had to splice in, and this is for our oil temp gauge, which I still need to plumb, and I need to change the wiring on because I made a mistake, and I can show you that. But otherwise, I'm really happy with how the dash came out. The big holdup right now is actually brakes. If we look under the car, there's a bit of a spill down there. And that's because every time I fill and bleed the brakes, I find a new leak, a new puncture, or a new tear somewhere in the brake system. First, it was this chassis hardline, which actually goes under this rail for the front corner. There was a puncture in it. The second time, there was a leak in the rear where the T was, back in here with the brake line, or the brake light switch. Which that one was nothing easy. It was just loose. However, the third time we found a leak here at this T, and it's actually the line for the front passenger brake has a crack in it and is leaking. Whenever you apply pressure, it's just leaking on the transmission. And then again up front, this banjo fitting is weeping, and we can't get it to stop. It's just not sealing properly. And whether that's a problem with the crush washers or the banjo fitting, what have you, it's leaking and we can't get it resolved. With all of these issues on the brake system, this is the brakes as they were delivered from the factory. And you can see, I even redid this brake line here with another bit of hard line to replace the one that was punctured. And while that line is fine, I've come into so many other problems with the brake lines on the car as they came that I just have to tear it all out and redo it. On the Ultima, I did all soft line like this, which is it's like a clear vinyl wrapped stainless braided PTFE line. And so that's what I got for the Zero, is I'm going to redo the whole system with that. And I'm just going to remove as much of the old system as I can get to, which isn't a lot because I just can't reach some of the clips where they reach up and under the chassis or around the drivetrain. I really don't want to pull the motor and transmission again. So I'm just going to end up zip tying the new line to the old one. But I've already ordered the parts. I'm just going to remake all the lines in soft line and just be done with it. And that way I know it'll work right from the get-go. I can test all the lines ahead of time. But I really wanted to have the brakes done before I started the engine, because basically as soon as you start the engine, you just want to drive the car. And it's more and more frustrating when one thing piles up and another piles up, etc. On the front of the engine, I have the belt length is set. I finally got the right tensioner from GBS. However, the belt width I was off by a rib. I could swear this was a 5 rib. It is not. It's actually a 6 rib belt. So I have a new one on the way, but it is, I think it's 53 inches in length. And this is the routing I had to go through. So what's different from the GBS setup is typically the alternator would be down over here in this area. And using the factory Ford or Mazda alternator, you need to use 2 of these smooth pulleys or idlers, and you put one up on the block in the normal location here, and then you install the other one down here with a washer or a couple spacers behind it down below on one of the bolt holes that would typically hold a bottom tensioner. And that allows this the belt to route clear of the VR sensor for the crank trigger pickup on the crank pulley itself. And so once all that's done, everything works just like it should. All the belt routing is perfect, and you just gotta add your tension in via this pulley here. So I'm really happy with how that came out, and we'll see how it tolerates high RPM. So fingers crossed we don't need to do anything more with that. Also, while we're down here, I don't know if I've shown it before, but our oil plate is on the motor for the last time here. This is our oil pressure sensor, and then below that is our oil idiot light, I guess you could say. It just simply turns on when there's low oil pressure. There has to be a separate fitting for the oil temperature sensor, and so my solution is I have a 10 AN kind of fitting insert here that is just a temperature probe that'll go in line for our oil filter and oil cooler, and that'll be before the oil cooler. That way we know the temperature of the oil coming out of the motor. We have our lines more or less done. I did run out of 10 AN fittings, so I have more of those on the way. But back in the front of the car, I relocated the oil filter up here next to, well, the end of the steering rack, or the steering column. And you can see I still need to cut this line to length, but the fitting I had is a 90 degree. I didn't like the angle on it, so I have a 120 degree on the way, which should angle the hose out this way. And then this hose here, this is our feed line to the oil cooler. Back under here, this is our return line, which comes back, and actually I have to change the orientation of these because I want this one to run underneath, and it'll kind of zip tie into these guys and be nice and clean. That's it for the progress up here. Oh, man, I'm dying here. It's, I mean, it's August. Well, it's now today. It's August 1st. Officially, fire season has started here in California. We have a couple of wildfires burning already, and I'm sorry if you hear me sniffling or anything like that, or clearing my throat. It's just that there is smoke in the air. It smells like fire. So I'm just kind of doing my best and not dying in the heat or in the smoke. There's not much left to do in the wiring harness department. I need to wire up our two fuel pumps and do a final nut and bolt on our fuel system, just to make sure that all the lines are tight before I start adding any fuel. I still need to relocate our license plate light and actually raise it by a few inches so that a US number plate will fit underneath it. On newer Gen 2 cars, all the holes are already pre-drilled so you can put it in the appropriate location. But in this car, it was only made for the European plate. I still need to put our axles in. And the only reason I haven't is because I still need to tidy things up in the back of the car. I still need to final mount the seats and show you guys our solution to the seat mounts. And, you know, clean up a bit in the interior here, but I wanted to have all of the wiring done and everything under the dash and all the trim pieces done before I buttoned it up, because once I get the dash in, I really don't want to have to get up underneath there for anything. Really only a couple things left. I still need to wire up our defrost whatever for the window. I need to wire up the remote start button. I think that's really it on the wiring side. There's just not a lot left. It's little onesie twosie stuff here and there. I can show you my mistake. This harness that I created for the oil pressure sender should actually plug into this guy, another DTM connector for oil pressure here, and then this is the connector for our oil idiot light. I need to change this end to the smaller or 1/4 inch or 1/8 inch spade that fits inside of the factory idiot light sender. I can show you on this piece. So this is the factory oil whatever takeoff from the block. This is our factory oil filter mount. This is our idiot light sender, for lack of a better term. This just closes the circuit when the pressure is too low. And if you look in there, there's just this tiny single pin, and it takes a little 1/8 inch spade connector to plug it in. I don't have the other end of this plug. I can try and double check my harness, but I don't believe I have this. And you can just jam an 1/8 inch spade connector in there, but if you have that connector, it makes life a bunch easier. There's this mistake. So this was the Mountoon plate, this beautiful piece that I somewhat ruined. So when I was putting the temp sensor in, it broke off in there. That's all I could say about that. It's just the temp sensor broke off. It really didn't feel like I was putting that much torque on it. It just broke off inside of the housing, and I wasn't sure if I could get that out without damaging the rest of this. So for now, I just tore this off, and I'm using the GBS factory piece. That's unfortunate because those aren't cheap, but what's more important is getting this car on the road. All right, kind of more of a walk and talk here, but after all that, just basically bouncing from job to job, nothing really worth filming too much because we sort of already saw it before. The exhaust is finally bolted on, so everything is set here. You can see I have some marks on the body. This is where where I need to trim the hood. So I'm just going to leave these on. It's basically Sharpie, but it'll come off with alcohol, so nothing doing. But exhaust is on. I've finished the wiring on this side of the engine. I've cleaned up our battery mounts and our battery wiring. I've installed our catch can, which is just bolted down to the floor there, so it is removable in case I need to get the alternator or the battery out. That'll just make life easier. So all the plumbing, everything on this side is done. Speaking of this side, So this is the factory Ford quick disconnect for the PCV, or the valve cover breather. And I wasn't happy with the hose that GBS sent. It should be like a 5/8 inch hose, but I think it was closer to a 1/2 inch because I couldn't get it to fit where a 5/8 hose would fit. So I've replaced it with this fabric covered braided hose. So that just slips over the end here. It comes up to our breather catch tank here with there's a cup on the bottom that comes off when I need to empty it. And then on the other side, if we pull this out of the way, if we follow this line now on the other side, it comes up underneath here and connects to the PCV breather plate. This is the radium breather plate from before. I also put a plug on, I think this is the heater line, or maybe a water pump bypass line from the factory, but there is nowhere for it to plug in back on the filler neck, so that's just plugged for now. Also, as far as wiring goes, all the wiring is complete down below here. So things like our fuel pumps are done, our starter's done, all our sensors for the oil pressure idiot light and the oil pressure sensor. It's kind of hard to see, but if you look right down there, kind of between the oil lines and the engine, there is a plug. And that is where oil temperature sensor is supposed to go, is down there in the bottom of the oil pan. But because we're putting the Duratec engine and the Gen 1 chassis, I think these bottom rails are more narrow, or the engine sits in such a way that it is much closer to that rail than it is in Gen 2 cars. And for whatever reason, the sensor doesn't actually fit in that spot. It would hit the chassis, and you could potentially damage it when you drop the motor in. So I couldn't run it there. And my solution was running the oil temp sensor in the top of the remote oil filter adapter here, and it just comes up in the top here. This is the same oil filter that I run in the Ultima, same size and everything. What's good for a V8 should be good for the 4-banger here, and that allows me to stock only one type of oil filter, which is convenient. I did finish up our oil lines, so they came off our oil takeoff here, which is kind of hard to see. They run down below here, hook up with our filter, and then forward to our cooler, which is right there kind of below and behind the radiator, and then back into our takeoff plate. So now our oil system is completely closed, and we're just waiting on a couple more pieces to finally bolt our intake on, and that is these kind of injector plugs. So GBS give you these injector plugs. They're just simple parts machined out of aluminum. They take an O-ring, and it's an O-ring seal, and it's a really tight flush fit against the head. They're beautiful pieces, but because they block the ports, I can't use this location for part of our PCV system. The reason this is important is with ITBs and the depth of these butterflies being so far back, there are no ports that I can open or have access to for a vacuum signal behind the butterflies, and B, as a vacuum return or an after butterfly return for the PCV system. And our solution is to use a plug like this but have a nipple that comes out of the top here, and it's hollow in the middle. And what that does is that gives us a port for each cylinder behind the butterflies that we can plumb to a log manifold or some other method that'll give us a way to feed this -8 line to the head behind the butterflies, and that'll allow us to A, meet emissions, but B, have a closed PCV system or a vacuum source or anything like that that could be used to tune the engine or what have you. So I'm just waiting on new machined parts. We did 3D print some parts, and I have to thank Sean for kind of the design and the quick little prototype, because he's the one that put that effort in and managed to kind of turn these into 3D bits. But the machined parts have been delayed, and it's just been hurry up and wait. So while I was hoping to start the car this weekend, it's just hurry up and wait. Once we have those parts, we can finally finish the install of our intake and then attempt to start the car for the first time. I think that's going to do it this time around. I know it's kind of a lot of talking and pointing and little bits of progress here and there, but there's really not much else to do. Half of this is sort of procrastinating doing the brakes again. I'm not looking forward to tearing all that out, but it is what it is. So I guess stay tuned for that next go around, but that'll do it for today, and I'll see you guys next time.